more work, right? And at the end of the day, yes, I know that I mentioned that, accounting is something that you're going to put in the hours in order to be successful, but the people who apply themselves and continuously want more and want to learn more are going to be the ones that are going to continue to advance, throughout the trajectory of their career.
The Job Guppy podcast is on a mission to help career explorers and job seekers find out from real people what a specific career or job is really like on a day-to-day basis. Join me, your host, Chris Hodges, as we dive in and explore jobs with each guest. You'll hear from experienced working professionals with transparent, realistic, and job-specific insight about the daily roles and their career journey. We go on to explore other topics like job search recommendations and income and salaries. You'll hear answers to questions like, do I need to go to college for this job? How much college? What is your work-life balance like? What do you like or dislike, or what would you do different? And if you don't like what you hear about one job role, we discuss alternative job titles to explore related to the same industry. And my favorite part is the end where the guest shares their inspirational insight and recommendations for the next person wanting to get started on their career journey. In this episode, I talk with an accounting manager, Eddy Gloria, about his career role as an accountant. This episode would probably be interesting to anyone considering a career in business. Eddy is an accounting manager for an investment firm in Chicago with 6 years in the industry. He graduated with a business administration and accounting degree. It is worth noting, like so many others I've interviewed, Eddy started college with a completely different major, biology. He pivoted to business though and never looked back. As an accounting manager, Eddy breaks down his job role, his team structure, and how it is all tightly coupled with a quarterly business cycle. He talks about the ins and outs of getting your CPA and MBA and how working for one of the big four early in your career can maximize opportunities. This is a field where moving between companies early in your career can help broaden the scope of your experience and help you later in your career. The Job Guppy website page for this episode will have a lot of useful links and references from the interview.
I'm on the industry of what they like to call operational finance, right? So I'm somewhat in the day-to-day booking payroll, operating expenses, non-people costs, you name it, we're covering it here in accounting, right? So we start off every single month the exact same way as we do every single month. Accounting is something that, it's a cycle and it starts all over again each and every single month. So for the first 7 days of the month, we're usually closing the books of the prior month. So for example, we just finished out closing the September financials, and that of course takes full team to essentially get all the numbers in, right? So you start off with payroll, start booking non-people costs, accruals, any sort of payments that happen, of course, reconciling bank statements, and then also booking any accounts receivable that was paid in that individual month. Once those numbers are booked up, I guess the next step in the process would be the reporting side, right? So our main job as accountants is to essentially make sure that all the financials are being booked accordingly. But our number two focus is to essentially report the numbers back to management so they can make better decisions. So during the second half of the month, we're usually compiling reports, month-end reporting that essentially is going to kind of give you a glimpse of how you're performing in that specific month, how you're trending year to date, and then also how are you trending towards the rest of the year, right? So that takes into account compiling actuals of what has already happened, and then also your budget, which is essentially combined into two, and then that builds the forecast. So like I mentioned before, accounting is extremely repetitive. So you're starting off with month-end close, you do the reporting, and then after that, it's somewhat, ad hoc reporting, right? So that essentially entails any sort of type of reporting that, management needs from you, whether that's, into people costs, whether that's into, operating expenses, maybe tax, whatever it may possibly be. I mean, that's essentially what we're here for. But throughout the entire month, you're essentially, you're tracking all of your receivables, all of your payments. And then at the end of the month, you're kind of buttoning everything up in order to, provide good information.
Do you represent just one company, or do you work with other companies that I guess you're helping other companies, they come to your company like clients, or are you working for your company, just your company itself?
Yeah, so just working for my company, standalone, we are an investment firm, so we have multiple different subsidiaries from within. So the company itself is called P6, and they have multiple different investments. We have investments in esports, we have trading firms, we have insurance companies. So I've been fortunate enough to work for the actual parent company, which gives me a lot of visibility into every single one of these companies that we have, right? So if the company is big enough to have their own accounting team, they, are hired solely focused on that accounting, doing the accounting for that specific company. But at the parent company, right, we also do handle multiple different companies within, while also maintaining, each and every single one of the accounting teams accountable for whatever they're doing. So the company that I'm solely, focused on right now is called Evil Geniuses, and also Sogo, which one is an esports company and the other is a financial literacy app. So very, very different. Both of them, give a lot of beneficial, I guess, learnings that I've had over time. But I think depending on the industry that I'm working with or whatever company I'm working with, I kind of learn, different things.
And I think you answered it in some of your wording there, but an accounting team. So my next question was, do you work by yourself or do you have a team of people where you're all playing a certain role, putting these, analytics and reports together? How important is that in your role that you have?
So as an accounting manager, it's extremely important, right? Like you can only become an accounting manager if you have people below you in order to obviously guide the accounting and make sure that you own the accounting fully. So I do have a staff accountant that, kind of handles all of the payments, all of the receivables, and then helps me out with a lot of the journal entries. And then during month end close, I'm essentially a lot of reviewing and, kind of just making sure that the books are being booked according as they should, while also making sure that our balance sheet, which is where we have our assets, liabilities, and equity, are being booked accordingly, right? Like that is the most important piece to financial statements, is kind of knowing where a company's position is. With that being said, I also do have a payroll person. She handles the entire payroll operation. Obviously, we have, over 100 employees at the company. So once you get over a certain size, you're definitely going to need somebody to solely focus on payroll because, more than likely you're going to get paid out biweekly. And with that also comes a lot of tax filings, a lot of 401ks, a lot of benefits. So have somebody solely focused, on payroll, and then also have a controller. So our controller is essentially, he's in charge of the whole entire finance operations. So that includes payroll, that includes finance, which is essentially a lot of forecasting and budgeting, and then also in charge of the accounting entirely. And then we did just add on somebody else. It's FP&A analyst, so he helps out a lot with forecasting and budgeting around that area. So definitely depends on the size of your company, but more than likely you're going to have at the minimum at least a few analysts and then somebody who's kind of overseeing it.
And you're the one that's overseeing it as the account manager.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. No, that paints a real good picture there. And so I take it a lot of time is in the office. It doesn't sound like something you travel around to.
Correct. Yeah. We, rarely travel. If we do travel, it's probably going to be maybe once a year to go do a conference, maybe in New York or something like that, where you're somewhat, expanding your insights into the actual industry. But yeah, it involves absolutely no travel at all. And then it's the type of role that you could really do remote entirely. So a lot of companies nowadays after COVID have gone remote and it seems to work perfectly fine. My company specifically, because we have multiple offices in different areas of the US, we're doing 2 days a week right now, or 3 days a week, really up to you. But it's kind of
mostly
nice.
Hybrid, right?
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
Mostly hybrid. But then again, it's just really, really nice because you don't have to drive it. It's something that you can solely,
But it's not totally remote wherein somebody could, when I said travel, if somebody liked to travel, they're not going to go on the road for a month and still do this job. It's going to be hybrid. It's a few days a week. So,
yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. And meeting time versus just sitting at your computer, hacking away, the fun part of the job versus unfun part of the job. Where does that fall?
So obviously, the more that you go up, the more meetings that you're going to have. That's just kind of, the standard in most places, right? So for an analyst who's kind of, in the day-to-day operations and, not really in charge of overseeing the books, I would say maybe you're spending about 2 to 3 hours, maybe a day in meetings. It's mostly, connecting with your team to make sure that, you guys are, getting everything that you guys need and are trending to meet deadlines. But other than that, as you go up, like I said, on a managerial level, you definitely are going to get a little bit upwards of, at least half of your day in meetings, maybe 4 hours or so.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, if you get up to the CFO roles, that's making basically every single financial decision. So, you're going to get into meetings of around 6 to 7 hours a day while delegating all of the work.
So getting back in a little bit of the daily workflow, working, programs that work with all these numbers that you're, opening files and looking at spreadsheets. For me, that's Microsoft Excel, but I'm going to guess maybe there's bigger tools that you guys use. Is that true? And follow up to that is, Is that something you learned in college, or is that something you learned on the job?
So Excel is going to be, the main software. Any sort of finance person is going to spend, 80% of their time, with an Excel. That's kind of where you're getting your work done. But then you also are going to need your GL system, right? So essentially where you're booking these numbers, where you can go to essentially, download a balance sheet, an income statement, all of those good things, right? So 80% of it's spent Excel, the other 15% is essentially in the accounting ERP system. For Excel, I do remember, having some classes that required us to, submit some assignments in Excel. But then again, it wasn't much, right? Especially not with how much you actually spend in it during your actual job. But aside from that, there is software that helps you, build better charts, right? So for better reporting. So once you have your numbers, you can somewhat like Power BI sort of thing, or I can't think of it right now, but
So kind of on that note, and we'll kind of wind down with this before we get into some of your career path. How would you say college prepared you for what you're doing right now?
yeah, I definitely do think college was 100% worth it. I think it kind of reassures you, right, that it's the right career path that you essentially want to go into. But not only that, accounting is something that is regulated by, the FASB. So it's the standards board that puts all the rules together for companies to kind of abide, and then it's overseen by the SEC, right? So all of these rules change consistently. Every single year they kind of come together and see where they can improve and button things up so companies can report better. So that is exactly what you're learning in school.
Okay, so it's very applicable. It's
Yeah, correct. Absolutely.
Okay.
So, these type of questions or these type of, standards are being revised. So every single year to the point that colleges are pivoting depending when these changes happen, right? So I remember specifically so many different things that I learned in college where, for example, the main problems that you're actually solving in class may not be relevant to what you're doing, but it's the principles that are, the most important piece of it all, right? So making sure that you really understand how, you have to amortize a fixed asset, right? And how do you determine the life of it and et cetera, right? So there's many different examples that I can definitely go into it, but I think it's extremely beneficial that you go to college and obviously get your degree in order to really apply it, during your.
And so that will kind of segue into your career path and your journey. I'd even started at college or maybe even a little before, but how or when did you know that this is what you wanted to do?
Yeah.
And then as you went through your career path, did it kind of line up that way? Or have you segued or moved into different areas, that were different than what you expected?
Yeah, of course. So, funny enough, I actually started as a biology student. My father always wanted me to become a dentist, so that's just the only thing that I ever knew growing up. I think of 2 years into biology, I knew that it just wasn't for me. I know it took a little bit too long, but overall, it just kind of reassured me that biology is just something. It wasn't something that I was willing to do for the long term. So I always knew that business was my number one interest over time. And I decided to, pivot into business. So when switching into business, there's so many different avenues that you can go into. You can go into entrepreneurship, you can go accounting, you can go finance, you can go supply chain. There's really a ton of different avenues, all great, majors. But I think the most important piece for me was when I joined a business class, I didn't really know where I was going to go. So whenever you start business school, you go into somewhat experimental courses. So your first year is, doing a little bit of managerial course. You do one course with finance, you do another one with accounting, you do another one with supply chain. So it gives you an idea of what that industry is essentially about, I guess. And out of all of them, accounting was the one that just made the most sense to me.
So you actually had that exposure in your program at school. You didn't have to go out and intern and do different kinds of jobs. Your program, and where did you go to school?
Correct. So I went to the University of Houston.
Okay, so University of Houston had that exposure. And do you find that that's common among other people you work with that went to, I don't know if you talk to other people about this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but do you know if that's common in other programs, or is there something special about University of Houston's business program that does things a little differently than other schools that you've noticed when you meet
Yeah,
other people?
this is standard across all, every single
It
U.S.
is. Okay.
College, and the reason is because whenever you first start out, these are courses that are required for you to obviously, be able to graduate. So whenever you first start out, you're always taking your basics, right? So your basics are required for what the basic structure of a business degree is. And it's just like, biology. In biology, you're going to see a little bit of chemistry, a little bit of biology, you're going to see a little bit of physics, right? So you're going to cover all the basics first before you move on to your specific major courses. So, with business, it's really, really nice because, your first year, you're taking all of these core classes and you're really understanding where you actually are drawn to. And thankfully, accounting is the one that really rang the bell to me.
And you have a 4-year degree, bachelor's, or do you pass
Correct.
that?
Yep. Yeah, have a
Okay.
have a bachelor's degree. That's correct.
What's been your career ladder in particular? What, like
Yeah,
your
of course.
steps or titles along the way that you've kind of went through?
Right off of school, you start off as a staff accountant. After that, I then transitioned over into a senior staff accountant. After the senior staff accountant, I was promoted to accounting supervisor, and then after accounting supervisor, you essentially move into accounting manager.
What are some of the possible career rungs moving on up past that?
Yeah,
Maybe
of
for
course.
you or anybody, but
Yeah, so there's multiple different ways that you can kind of look at your career within accounting. You could either be a CFO or you can kind of go into the controllership side of things. So the controller side of things is going to be focused more on the accounting per se, right? So you're very focused into the actual numbers. Whereas the CFO is going to be focused on the future, right? Future spend, where can we cut costs, like that type of forward thinking lens. Both are extremely beneficial, both pay great, but it's just really about, what you want to do.
is there anything you think people would be surprised to know, or maybe you were surprised as you got into it that you kind
Yep.
of wish you would have known in college?
I guess I wasn't really ready for the amount of hours that, I somewhat work on a day-to-day basis. I wish it was something that, someone kind of told you, hey, be aware they're going to be working around 12 hours, 13 hours, whatever it may be, right? Like at the end of the day, we all
Wow.
have to get the job done. But you are working long hours during the month-end close process. And then if you decide to go into public accounting, which is, these are the people that are auditing all of the companies within the United States books, you're going to work a really, really long time, specifically when you start out, because, most staff accountants and the people who are somewhat like associate level, we're the ones that are actually getting the work done, while managers are the ones that are reviewing. So that was the biggest shock to me is, how much hours you're going to be putting into accounting.
It's a big factor. I mean, that's not like a couple hours extra every now and then.
Right, right, right.
Is it cyclical, on a certain basis where you do have some normal hours, or is it just it's always like that?
I would say that it is, right? So the first 2 weeks of the month, we're extremely busy closing out the book. So that's when you're working, the most of it. On the back end of things, it does slow down. So, you might get back to 40, 45, but most accountants are working a regular 50-hour schedule. Like that's
Yeah.
just
So
pretty
so it
standard.
basically feels like it's always there.
Yes, 100%,
Okay.
100%.
All right. That's how I would describe it. If it feels like it's always there, it doesn't matter if it is or isn't. It feels like it. It feels like it.
Exactly.
Um, I'll ask anyway, but I'm going to guess that was one of your dislikes about it. But are there any particular likes or dislikes? What do you like about it? And you mentioned a dislike. Do you have any other stronger dislikes? And what would you say you liked about your job?
What I like about my job is that it's repetitive. I know exactly what's going to happen when it's going to happen, right? So the beginning 2 weeks of the month, I know that I'm not going to be able to take vacation. I know that I'm going to be somewhat, having to get into the book. So I already know what my schedule is kind of ahead of time. I don't really have to manage myself. It's kind of easy to understand what your schedule is going to be like. So you're able to kind of pivot your life around that. At the end of the day, if you have to take off, like you're gonna have to take off. It's not that big of a deal,
Sure.
but for the most part, right, like your months are going to be continuous. So I do like that. And not only that, but I get a lot of visibility. You're getting the numbers. When a company is performing bad, you're going to know it. Whereas somebody in marketing or engineering or sales, they may not know. So you're able to kind of get a real life view of how the company is trending and, if it's something that you kind of want to stick around, right? So if the company that's a startup and you're seeing the cash somewhat slow down, I mean, you're kind of getting a first look at how, you're going to be performing for the following year. And not only that, but just the exposure that I've gotten. I get to sit with C-level executives every single week, right? Like, presenting to them or doing whatever it may be, the exposure that you're getting specifically, especially when you move up, it's been very rewarding. You get to sit down with some really smart individuals who can obviously, you can learn a lot from. From the dislike level, I think just working the hours is probably the hardest piece of it all. But then again, there's also times where you come across numbers that, people are asking you to pull that just maybe it may take some time just depending on how clean the numbers were back in the day. So, for example, a lot of the times how people really want to make decisions is they want to see what the spend is year over year. So, for example, yourself, you're in engineering, you kind of want to see, hey, can you please pull total cost for 2020, 2021? I just want a trending view of what my spend is, going back to 2020 so I can make a decision for this year for the budget, whatever it may be. That can be a little bit tough, very, very manual, which obviously takes a long time. So I think that is probably my biggest dislike about the position itself. But I think finance is extremely rewarding. It's a great, great career that you could easily, jump into. And, it's always going to be here.
What would you think or would suggest, some personality traits for somebody listening to this that they might, I call it like checking boxes off. If there's a few personalities and they don't have any of them, I don't know if this is for them, even though they thought they wanted the reward part of it. But so what would you say might be some of those personalities? And if there are any that's just like, this would probably not be good for you if you had these kind of personalities.
I think organization is the number one most important thing. You have to be organized in order to do this. There's a million of things that you have to do on a monthly, quarterly and yearly basis that are required of you to be successful. So being organized, making sure that you're getting your tasks done as needed is going to be essential, to be successful in the industry. And then also, if you're not able to explain things well, right? You have to be very, very good with your wording. And the reason why I mean that is because a lot of people are not going to understand numbers. Whether it's you're talking to somebody in marketing or sales, whatever it is, your job is to make complicated numbers sound easy, right? So how can I possibly paint a picture in your head to make better decisions for the future without it being too crazy complex? That is literally a finance person's job. So, and then obviously being good with numbers, I think that's also extremely important. It's just obviously being able to understand, the basic numbers and being able to explain them. I think it's probably the most important piece.
Do you have ongoing certifications that you have to just continually go back to school for each year that you're just never going to get away from? Or is this something just always on the job? You just do your thing and you just kind of go about it?
Yeah, of course. So at the beginning, whenever you first join the accounting industry, you're only required to have your bachelor's degree. But as you do progress within the industry, you are required to go get a CPA, right? Most companies and most job boards, for any senior and above, and what I mean by senior analyst, senior accountant, they're going to require you to have, a CPA or at minimum a master's degree. Every single job post is going to say CPA or MBA preferred.
Did you know that in college, or was that something that came to light after you graduated?
Oh, absolutely. This is something that, has been on, very, very hard within college. All of your professors, advising you. So yeah, it's something that's very well known in the industry itself. They do advise that you do it as early as possible because obviously the later that you kind of get into your life and obviously progress within your company, you're going to have more duties, and obviously less time for yourself. So it's 4 exams. It'll take you about a year to kind of study each section and get that all taken care of. But, my biggest advice to everybody is just get it done with. As soon as you graduate school, get it over with. It's going to, allow you to somewhat have better opportunities once you do, start to advance. And not only that, but it's going to give you more money in your pocket. Most CPAs get paid at a minimum. I mean, it's not, substantial, but at minimum, $10,000 to $15,000 per year more than somebody who doesn't.
So that's a great segue because the next topic is income. I leave this open to, if anybody listens to more than one of these, they probably get tired of hearing me say the same thing over and over. But I leave this part because I know it's a sensitive subject sometimes. So it's kind of wide open in whatever sense you would like to talk about it. Maybe your career, people the industry in general. How would you describe the lifestyle that you have with this? Kind of, does it cap out? Does it exponentially grow? Where do people kind of tend to start and work their way up? If somebody didn't become CFO, would they still feel like they had a very nice lifestyle? If they didn't go that direction and just kind of capped it with good longevity in the field?
So, starting out, you're kind of just going to go into it flat base. You're going to start off around 50 to 75,000. That's pretty standard across the industry, but it all depends on the size of your company. That is going to be the most important piece, right? So if you're working for an Apple, I mean, you're going to get paid a lot more because the volume of work, I guess, is going to be a lot higher than it would be if you're working for somewhat of like a mid-range type of company, or whether if it's going to be somewhat of a mom and pop type of company where you're kind of, a team of 2 running the whole entire finance department. So the bigger the company, the more the pay. That's kind of just starting out. But the opportunities for earnings are endless. Once you start moving up to the senior roles, you're getting to the 100K to 125. Once after that, you get to accounting manager, and accounting manager is between 125 and 150. On top of that, then you go to controller. You could, essentially make probably cap it at like 200. This all includes at least a 10 to 20% bonus with the numbers that I mentioned. So all in all, it's a very rewarding career. You can make, great money, and there's really no cap, just because most people don't want to be accountants. That's just the honest truth, right? Accountants are continuing to the whole industry is somewhat starting to be on the decline with the amount of majors that are coming out of college. So
Really?
with that, obviously, is going to continue to increase over time. So I imagine what I first started out at is probably not even close to what somebody starts out at right now,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, and folks will be able to find stuff, like if they do job research, and I'll try to mention links to Glassdoor, other places where you can find
yeah,
information.
PayScale is the best.
PayScale, that's one. Okay.
Yep, that's probably the best case. It's going to give you the best and most accurate data. For
Yeah.
example, at our company, whenever we're comparing market values and we're bringing somebody on, that's the company that we're usually going to for insights.
But you do know, like just on your experience, it's possible for somebody to get up in that 200K range. They're starting off somewhere around 50 to 75, and they could go all the way, expand up to 200K. And that's just kind of on the salary side. And then there's the,
The
bonuses, like
bonus
you
side,
said, that get
right,
brought in with it too. So that's,
correct,
just icing on the cake. So it
right.
can be a pretty lucrative career.
Yeah, and I didn't even get into the CFO. So CFO, that's where the big bucks are, right? So once
Mm-hmm.
you're CFO, I mean, you could range anywhere between 250 to 500 easily, right? And like I said, it's all depending on industry. There's a lot of different types of accounting. So, like I said, I'm in the operational side of accounting, but for example, if you get into the reporting side of accounting, that's probably going to get you more money than operational accounting is. There's consultants who are actually, working for multiple different, companies at once. That also pays quite a bit. So there's not, I can't put a cap on it because I mean the earnings are kind of uncapped, really.
You said something right there that keyed in on. You mentioned, we talked about certain titles before, like staff accountant, senior, but you said something right there about it's not even industries. You used words like operations,
Yep.
kind of financialist, consulting. Like, how would somebody find out about those different kinds of analysts? If they preferred one over the other, or one sounded more interesting, what would they look for if they were looking for information there?
Yeah, and what I mean by operational accounting is just I'm kind of in the finance industry of, reporting the numbers for an individual company, right, in order to make better decisions. Like for example, like I am, like let's say I work for, Microsoft. I'm booking all the revenues for Microsoft, I'm booking all the people costs, I'm booking all the expenses and kind of reporting that to upper management. Whereas, for example, reporting accounting manager, they might be solely focused on providing reporting to the SEC, right? Like if this is us actually filing, paperwork that's required of us for investors or whatever it may be, which requires you to go to school for a little bit more. You need a master's degree. Most people need MBAs in order to actually get there. Because it's very analytical, right? So those jobs are a little bit tougher than, for example, what I'm doing. I'm closing out books for the company where they're kind of handling like a whole different side of it. For example, there's lease accountants. There is revenue accountants that are solely focused on revenue. So it's all depending on the size of the company, but the job description will take care of that. The job description is going to kind of lead you into what the job is going to be about, so you can get a better sense of what you'll be doing day to day. Whenever it says month end close, closing the books, accounts receivable, accounts payable, that's operational side of accounting. So multiple different types of accounting that you can kind of go into. But at the end of the day, it's all about just making sure that you're thoroughly reading the actual job description and obviously reading the requirements as well as you possibly can. But not only that, just make sure that you're continuously asking questions during the job interviews. I think it's the most important piece to really get a good sense of what you're walking into.
So let's just talk about job searching then. If you could, are there well-known forums to job search, or is it kind of wide open on the common ones that most people know about, like Indeed, Monster.com, LinkedIn? Are there special ones for this career field that people should look for? And then what would be some of the titles that are pretty commonly, always going to be in a title of a job search if somebody wanted to just kind of poke around and read job descriptions? What specifically should they be looking for?
The main ones are obviously going to win the most. I mean, that's where most companies post, job opportunities. So it's going to be LinkedIn, Glassdoor, and Indeed. I think those are the top three. Job
Mm-hmm.
Finder is another one. All of those are really, really good. And then jobs that are going to kind of always going to be there is accountant jobs. I mean, accountants are always going to be looked after, no matter what industry it is. Everyone always needs an accountant, which is extremely rewarding to be in the industry because you're always going to have a job no matter what.
So would that be the term? That would be the term, just accountant? Like, should
Yep.
they add anything to it? Just accountant, and then they'll see. That's the best way to see all the different kinds of accounting jobs, right? Is that what you're
Exactly.
saying? Okay.
Right. And then not only that, I mean, some people can get fancy with it and call them analysts. So, for example, whenever I first started out here, my company, I was an accounting analyst instead of a staff accountant, right? Like, as long as you go for accountant or analyst roles, they both, coincide
You'll
together
see
for the most part.
you'll get a large volume just with that
Absolutely.
search. Okay.
100%. The one thing with analysts, right, it can go into business analyst, which is more of like a model building sort of operational type of analyst, which is obviously going to be more reporting oriented. But like I said, I think going with accountant is probably the best.
Going back a little bit to schooling, is there any like top three schools in the industry, or I'd say even top three companies in the industry that, are just like golden tickets?
The big four accounting firms are Deloitte, PwC, Ernst and Young, and KPMG. So
Okay.
they are, they bring in the most students out of any other company in accounting every single year. And not only that, but it's just really, really, really good experience. You're going to get to work with multiple different clients because it's consulting at the end of the day, right? So you're going to have multiple different companies that you're going to work for. You're going to get to see different industries. You're going to get to see different financials where you're going to really understand how you should actually be booking things. But not only that, but they're a lot of fun. For first year students, second year students, you're going to meet a ton of people in the industry. So you're going to get really, really good connections. You're going to get paid the most out of any other company starting out. They're going to pay for your CPA. So they're really, really good companies to work for starting out. And not only that, but a lot of job boards have gone as far as actually adding that as a requirement. So
Really?
most
Wow.
of them within the job description and requirements, they'll say, big four accounting experience required or preferred or whatever it may be. And the
That's
reason is
interesting.
because most of these people have been taught the fundamental basic side of accounting very, very, very well. So something that I always suggest to my interns or anybody who, I mentor, I think going into Big Four is something that you should do for maybe a year or two. Sure, you're going to, have to grind and it's going to be long hours, but the compensation for it, in the long term, it's going to be very beneficial for you to, just kind of go out there and learn, the ropes into the industry. I think it's something that I would highly recommend.
And then the schoolings, like, are there any crazy golden ticket schools that are going to make it any easier to get into the big four? Like, are they well known for recruiting heavily from certain places, or is it just up to the individual, and any schools? It's kind of more up to the individual than it is what school you come from.
Yeah, I think as long as you go to a good university with a good background and obviously continue to do well in school, I think that should be fine. Internships are going to be extremely important, to actually make sure that you've got a little bit of experience before actually going on to the real world.
Do you find that the CPA part, but not even talking about the site certifications, but just the bachelor's, the master's, the PhD, are there benefits to continued education before you get into it doesn't have to be before, but just as you get in the field, get into your career, are there benefits to having a master's degree or a MBA, or even a PhD? Is that going to help you out in any way? Like, how would that help you out if you did, or not be worth it, in your
Yeah.
opinion?
I think the CPA is the most important piece in accounting. But as far as, going out and getting your master's and PhD, I think it matters where you go. For example, a master's or a PhD from a random college in Illinois or Texas or whatever it may be, it's not going to do anything for you. It's not going to get you more money. It's not going to, personally, it may, right? Like you may learn a lot of different things within business. But unless, you're going to Booth, the University of Chicago, or you're going to Kellogg, or Northwestern, or you're going to the business school UT, right? Like you want a master's degree that comes from a a recognized university that is essentially building, good CFOs and good CEOs, because that's going to help you out once you get to those levels, right? Like,
Okay, so that needs to be very purposefully thought through
correct.
then.
Exactly.
If you can go for it, that needs to be okay. No, that's very important and helpful. And since you said it that way, does that help someone's career by doing that?
Absolutely. Right. Like
It would?
if
Okay.
you were to go into Chicago booth and you got your MBA there, I mean, you're going to be wanted by every single, company you could
Okay.
possibly ever go for. Right. So I could go out and apply for Apple, Microsoft, and it's going to pay off. But like I said, if you just go to a random college who no one's going to know whenever you're kind of talking about them, it's not going to make any difference at all.
That wasn't to say this is the only way to be successful in this career field.
Correct.
Those are just kind of a way to, maximize your success rate. So, okay, so going on into the, advice part, what advice would you offer for somebody that's thinking about getting into this field? What do you wish maybe you would have done different too? You kind of put those two together a little bit. And
First and foremost, I can't, say this enough. Get your CPA, get it out of the way, get it as soon as you're out of college. It's the most important piece. Every single, interview, everyone's going to ask for it. So I'd highly suggest that you get that out of the way as soon as possible. And then second and foremost, continue to apply yourself. I think the most successful people within the industry are the ones who are actually wanting to learn, want to advance, ask questions, continuously ask for more work, right? And at the end of the day, yes, I know that I mentioned that, accounting is something that you're gonna put in the hours in order to be successful, but the people who apply themselves and continuously want more and want to learn more are going to be the ones that are going to continue to advance, throughout the trajectory of their career. And I think one thing that is kind of not talked about very often, right? I think it's great if you kind of, start out at one company, work your way up and, retire and kind of just stay with one company, because it could be beneficial in many different ways. But I do think that bouncing around into different companies is going to only make you better at your different roles. So for example, the experience that I've had in my previous companies before I joined Peak Six have kind of shaped and molded me into a better accountant today, because the things that I somewhat experienced in the past, I was able to kind of apply that here and kind of say, oh, no, I've done that before. That actually didn't work. Or, hey, you know what? I see that we're doing this today. I know a better way that we can get better results. So I think within your early work experience, I think it's extremely important to kind of see different industries and just kind of apply yourself.
What I'd like to kind of separate from that is, there's risk taking, and then there's why are you taking the risk? And in your case, what you're advising is don't go take the risk just to go get another job because you're going to make more money when you change companies. It's go take the risk, change the jobs because you're going to get exposure, and make that your focus up front. Don't make the money making up front. Like, get your CPA, do the hard work, do it all up front, take the risk, move around with jobs, get the exposure. Don't make it about, you didn't say don't make it about the money. I'm kind of saying that, so I don't want to put words in your mouth.
You're 100% correct.
And then that all is going to pay off later, and hopefully, sooner rather than later. So,
yep.
But that's another personality I would bring into this aspect of this is a job that's conducive to moving around to get exposure, not staying in one job to get exposure or with one company maybe.
And definitely not saying, right, that, it's not beneficial to stay at a company, because it is, right? Like many people have been extremely successful sticking around with one company and just kind of riding out, the entire way, just because you kind of see it from the ground up, be able to kind of, build different things. But I just think that over time, the different industries that I've seen have been extremely beneficial.
All right. Well, Eddy, I can't say enough. I appreciate your time, giving some great insight. And this is a career field I don't know much about. I appreciate it. And, hope that somebody listening to this has some good insight into what an account manager, life is like, what the role is like, and how to go about that if they decide that's what they would like to pursue.
No, thank you so much for having me on. And, hopefully you can have me back on as I continue to somewhat progress with the industry.
Yeah, I love that, man. Thanks. If you like what you hear and want to take the next steps in exploring your career after listening to an episode, go to jobgubby.com to see a summary and helpful links to things mentioned during the interview, like industry-specific forums or websites, example job searches, career ladders, and degree programs or trade school recommendations. The hope is you now have more information than you did before from the guest on the podcast to help you move forward with the next steps on your career exploration journey. Tune in each week as Job Guppy continues to explore a million jobs in the sea.